Hello all, and welcome to the first episode of QQ's The Inkwell Radio Hour. This is our new radio show where we have fun with all things creative and artsy. I'm Dalton Mosley, one of the co-managing editors of the Quiz and Quill magazine, and I'll be hosting this first episode. First up, some events. Hoodlums and Hipsters is November 7th. Come to the third floor of Old Bag of Nails and join the open mic. There's free food and good work being shared. Our fall chapbook is also releasing digitally that same day, so look out for that. Now, on to today's topics. Two of our published authors will be sharing their work and talking about it, and we'll be featuring some old submissions from our archives. Our first author today is Catharina. Go ahead.
I'll be reading an excerpt from an essay from my chapbook, Lost in Loss. I don't remember the last time I prayed, or the last time I wished there was a God in heaven. It felt like another cold autumn night with rain on its way. It was around 9, I want to say, but after a few days, my memory was fuzzy. My mother opened my door without knocking like she usually does, and bid, "Come and pray with me." My face mentally twisted. I didn't like praying. Your grandpa died, but that night I complied. I could only muster an "oh." I prayed the rosary with my mother and younger brother, like we used to back when she used to force us to pray with her every night. I entered her room, and we sat in the same exact spots as if we never stopped. My mother on the floor kneeling, my brother sitting on the bed, and I sat on the chair in front of the mirror. My mother asked my brother to lead like he did before, but he didn't have the book on that he had different prayers and mysteries. He acted like he couldn't do it. My mother tried to find the right book, but couldn't, and asked him if he could just Google it. She was desperate. I shifted uncomfortably. He gave in and reached up the instructions, and we began. This is when I realized I had forgotten my rosary, but more than that, I didn't even remember where I last placed it. Maybe I threw it away while I was deep cleaning my room that past summer, so I counted with my fingers. Though if I felt childish, it was fine. I don't remember what I was thinking during that time, just that I was cold and wished I wore my hoodie before coming in. By the end of it, we all sat in silence. This usually happens when we're done praying the rosary. My mother would always pray more, while my brother and I went back to our rooms, but this time I didn't leave. My mother had lost my father suddenly. I went up to her. She was still kneeling, her eyes closed, her hands clasped together. I bent down and hugged her. I'm not really the best when it comes to comforting someone, much less my own mother. To my surprise, she stood up and began to shake. I don't think I've ever seen my mother cry. Usually, whenever she would hug me, it would be a tight one, but she would squeeze me at the end as if she was saying "I love you," but her hands were floating and loose. She was barely holding me. Instead, I hugged her tightly, as I vividly felt her staggered breath, her sniffles, her chest going up and down unevenly. Then I felt my younger brother's arms around me. I don't know why I felt the need to hold back my tears. My grandpa died, and I was in a distant embrace with my family. Should I be crying right now? But my lower back was hurting, and I had a headache, and I still hadn't finished my project. My mother let go and looked me in the eyes. "You should have given them the note. You should have remembered to give it to me." Yes, my lips pursed. I wanted to be angry, but I knew in part she was right. I'm sure making me feel guilty will make her feel better. I hoped it worked, because it did for me. I laid in bed. The news hadn't yet soaked into me. The words, "You should have given them the note," echoed in my mind. Closing my eyes, I felt the warmth of my blanket throughout my body, but the chill of the wind brushed my face through the open window, kept me at a small alertness. The sound of the rain, my father's laughter as he was outside on the phone with someone, and my headache all lulled me into a painfully numbing sleep, as I didn't realize then that it was the beginning of the end.
All right. Hello, Catharina.
Hello, Freddie.
Brilliant reading there. So, from my understanding, you read Lost in Loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, going into reading these two essays you have, which, for reference, I did read the whole entire chapbook. But Immediately what struck me is that it's fascinating the way you structure Lost and Lost, but also Yellow House especially. Both being about sort of like how we as people perceive the passage of time. And so thinking on these two essays and thinking about, your sort of train of thought now, has your perception of time changed at all for present Catharina?
It's a really good question, and I really don't think it has that much. Like, I'm thinking about past me right now, and or like past me and me right now. And every semester, I just kind of go through this cycle of productiveness. And I kind of like go more deep into it in my Lost and Lost essay about how every semester I try to be productive as possible because, I don't want to fail another semester because I've had before.
Right.
So I kind of just lose myself in schoolwork and not really being able to look up from what I'm doing because I already have so much to do that I just have a sudden realization of something has changed. Like having a sudden, like in Yellow House, having a sudden urge to just visit my old grandparents' house after like years after they moved, and all of a sudden seeing that house completely different. Or even in like Lost and Lost, like I kept trying throughout the essay, I kept trying to be productive. I kept trying to do my work. But, the death of my grandpa just kept nagging me like something has changed. And so I'll try to go into a flow and then something would just interrupt that flow.
Yeah.
It's
Sort of like a sudden thing for you. It doesn't really build at all. So I could definitely see how, when we focus ourselves in just like the sort of immediate concerning things, for one thing, it's so easy to just lose track of time. And then when you start thinking about it again, it sometimes just kind of hits you. So, yeah, I would agree absolutely. Going back to Lost and Lost especially, so there's a sort of like, I would call it an author's note at the very end of your book, understandably so. You say that in writing Lost and Lost, it was just a form of grieving for your grandfather. And so, of course, if you're comfortable sharing, though, I am interested to hear what that writing process looked like, as in, like, how long did it take you to write it? Did you write it in multiple sessions? Stuff like that.
Yeah, so I wrote Lost and Lost a few days after I heard the news. If my memory serves me correctly, I got the news Saturday, and then I just had the sudden urge to just write what was happening because, like I said before, like I was going through the flow of trying to do my homework and trying to do work, and then I had the feeling kept nagging me. And so a few days later, I was like, you know what, I just got to write this down. In the middle of doing like my assignments, I'm like, no, I need to write this down. I need to figure everything out. And so I just wrote everything that happened those past few days and like that day. And I just kept writing for a few days. And then coincidentally, I was in a class, I think it was called How to Write About a Vanishing World. And it was basically about loss. And our final project, we basically had to write essays or poems, the general idea, the theme of loss. We had to write about the theme of loss. And I was like, oh, well, all right, I guess this is for my final class project, I guess. And so I wrote the first draft, and I had about, I think, 2 or 3 drafts.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Very nice. And I mean, admittedly, Catharina, we don't know each other too well, and so with that being said, I mean, this was the first time I think I've read any of your work, and you had mentioned in the past that, oh yeah, I have this chapbook of mine that goes out to $2 radio and all, but I had no idea what it was going to be about, and so absolutely I was pleasantly surprised by your writing, and especially in the form of essay, which, for it being such a sort of a genre that you can really mess around with. Do you consider yourself an essayist? Do you write essay a lot of the time? What do you think?
I actually don't really write essays a lot.
Okay.
At this point, currently. Like, most of my life, I thought of essays as only being a real academic thing. Like, I gotta write an essay about this book, or I gotta write an essay about this assignment and this and that. Like, I never really thought that it could be very personal.
Mm-hmm.
Until, I went to college, I went to Otterbein, I took classes on writing. I'm like, oh, essays can be kind of about anything, really. And you can really write or mess around, like you said, mess around with the genre of essay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never really, when I was writing these two pieces, I never really thought of, oh, I'm writing an essay. I thought I am writing my real, genuine thoughts in hopes of processing everything. So I think doing that really kind of made me fall in love with the genre of essays. And I do hope to write more.
All right. Very well put, Catharina. All right. So up next, we have Adam Willis stepping up to the mic now. Going to be soon enough interviewed by Isaac Jones.
Late shift at aviary. What, if anything, is certain? I find this to be an oddly relevant question, one more prevalent in my daily experiences than I would wish to consider. As I finish my late shift at the aviary, clock striking 7 p.m., this thought of mine dawns on me, and I am forced, as I have been countless times before, to analyze the last hour and a half of my life for some sort of crack in the logic. Did I actually scrape that bird's scat off the walls? Did I rinse the grime off their looming perch? Did I place the quartered rat on their bloody feeding rock? Or was this all an illusion? I remember these sensations. Flapping wings, the smell of carrion, the sound of water gushing through a hose, overturned gravel, a red-shouldered hawk, a pristine feather I cannot touch, a turkey vulture staring at me with its blind eyes, a gaping beak, an outstretched tongue, sweat dripping like beads of cool silver down my calf, a child skipping past the cage, a black frog under the pail, a plathis moth against the grain, a creeping shadow, the last taste of golden sun. I remember these sensations. They happened. But was that me? Did I experience them? Was I ever even there? This millisecond of baseless doubt is enough to break my logic. I'm divided by zero, thrust headlong in a crazed loop. I turn to leave, and I feel the presence of that dangling obsession, the pricking of that compulsive pin, that dripping tap that will not cease. I run back to check something. Locked doors, filled troughs, dead rodents on bleeding stones. And when I turn away, thinking the pain has ended, the urge to start over returns. I repeat. Each time I turn around, I see their fresh water. I smell the limp rat oozing precious life from its severed body. But when I turn away from the immediate, it's as if a vast and immeasurable moon has eclipsed my brain, twisting neurological pathways, casting me out of the present. I'm compelled to rush back, breathless, sweating, one more time, then a second, then a third, then a fourth, just to make sure that it's all real, that I was there, that I did what I was supposed to do, that I wasn't imagining everything after all. Clear water, white fur, red tail, red shoulder, red blood. Checking, running, checking, running, checking, running, checking. Every completion of that loop marks an amber sun slightly deeper in the tree line, a twilight sky slightly diminished, slightly darker. By the time I finally break free from this cycle, another hour has lapsed. It's 8 p.m., and I am left stranded like a confused child in a stark black ocean. I drive home in deep contemplation, certain only of a single truth. There is no catharsis, and I am sure of nothing. This next one is called Left Turn at Intersection. At what point is someone truly safe? The answer to this question appears to be obvious. We are safe when we are outside of the perceived danger, a moment free from an immediate threat. We are safe when our body, our sensitive system of neurological impulses, drifts idly into a relaxed state, undoing the panic of vigilance of the sympathetic. We are safe within our trusted structures, houses, cars, a promise of protection and containment. We are safe when unimpeded. We are safe when we follow the rules. When these conditions are met, we are safe. This is the consensus. I am in my unbroken bubble. I am disconnected from the entropy of the moving system. I am unmarked by the chaotic force that wants to see me break. I am untouchable. I believed in this certainty when I was walking to my car. It hung in my mind when I twisted the key in the ignition, my actions sparking metal starting motion. It stood in my immovable thoughts, infinite weight, a concrete block, as headlights pierced the black wall before the road, carving a tunnel through the looming forest for my car and mine alone. And as I slowed at the unlit intersection, a barren road terminating into a two-laned highway, I allowed the sense of security to remain. The absence of a stoplight was a failed deterrent. The lone stop sign guaranteed no safe turn, yet my confidence in crossing those wide lanes told me otherwise. I'd driven this route dozens of times. There was no logic in fear. I looked both ways. I took the turn. The following second. Two lights break the darkness. An invisible form, the amorphous metal thing blending into the unfathomable black, closes the gap between us. A distant horn grows closer, louder, before ending abruptly. The space fills with sounds of destruction. Glass shatters, metal shrieks, chunks of engines skid across asphalt. Wheels twist off axles. The steering wheel explodes into a white balloon. My skull slams hard into the headrest. I look up. I'm 40 feet from where I remember. Silence returns. The smell of gasoline, static and smoke. Glass shards glisten like diamonds on the floor. I haven't had a chance to blink. A few seconds passed before I realized that I was not dead. I screamed. A raw, hysterical scream. Visceral terror, throbbing veins, nerves firing, neck muscles tightening, heart slamming against bone. I jump from the car, fearing an explosion, and run across the unlit highway. I'm dressed in dark clothing, black jeans and a leather jacket. The night surrounds me, and I am invisible. A truck going 80 or over speeds past like a silver bullet 3 feet from my soft body. Its horn blares in my ear from a distance so close I could almost feel the impact. Bones crushing under 7,000 pounds of steel, internal meat spread like bloody paste on the road. But the truck misses me, and I fall to my side, clutching my chest, my legs, my head, as if doing so undid the imagined dismemberment. I had somehow landed on the grassy divider, the gray-green patch of dying weeds that split the highway in two, a no-man's land that no human ever touches, no deer ever roams. It's from this position that I view the brunt of the wreckage, two piles of amalgamated machinery almost unrecognizable. My eyes fall on a puddle of gasoline. In its reflection, brake lights discharge their pulsating crimson. My mind plays tricks on me. It resembles blood. The prior illusion has been shattered, a privilege no longer available. That sense of security I felt only moments before had snapped during the cascading violence, and from it I had finally realized the true nature of vulnerability. The uniform red of the puddle is soon polluted by the flashing blue lights. Sirens echo, yet I've come out unscathed. Death surrounds me, and I'm alive by random chance.
In both of these, well, first actually, I want to start with left turn at intersection. And I want to ask to you, because you do a lot of theorizing safety, a lot of thinking, obviously, about security as well. And so I guess the question is, are safety and security interchangeable?
For me, in the context of the writing, yes. But I think in a broader scale, no. I think something that is secure, it doesn't have the intent of the object or the person in mind. It's something that's just put away by some agent or being who wants to keep it in a specific state. When someone is safe, it accounts for the individual or the object's consideration. Yeah, that's my response to that.
So this turn onto the highway then, was the turn on the highway almost a delusion of safety?
Yeah, I would say that. This is a autobiographical piece in a way. So yeah, I that night I remember my mind was just full of other things. I was thinking about homework. I was thinking about my girlfriend at the time. I just assumed that I'd be fine. I've turned there dozens of times, however many times. I didn't think that safety was a question. It was something I assumed. And ever since then, luckily I survived, but it's just been something that's kind of lingered on my mind, that no one is really truly safe, especially when you put yourself in a position like driving, something you do every day. It's one of the most dangerous things that people do every single day of their life. So yeah, I would go so far to say it is an illusion. It's something we tell ourselves so that we are able to cope with reality.
I think that's fascinating, the way you consider safety almost as an intuition. You know it when you feel it. Intuition is often defined as the feeling of an event attached to its history that affects in some way our action, right? And so in the first essay, Late Shift at Aviary, it seems as though that's your first method for arriving at truth. So with the second part being this transgression of safety, right? This deep illusion of safety turning onto the highway, and then in the first, you trying to understand your experience. Like how does intuition play for you? And would you say that intuition is the way that you arrive at truth?
I would say no, and I say that because the first piece is not me in a calm state. So with Left Turn at Intersection, it's depicting me kind of in a parasympathetic state. I'm calm, I'm relaxed, and it's arriving to that truth through measurable things in reality. My reality has changed. It's what would be the word? It's been subverted. And so that's a measurable truth. That is an experience. With the first one, it's kind of details I suppose you could say, a neurotic episode I experienced. So I have OCD, and especially a few years ago, it was very debilitating for me. So I would go feed these birds at this aviary I work at, and when I do that, I would, because I'm alone, there's no one else observing it but me, I can't convince myself that I've done something.
Right.
So I'd have to check things. I'd have to keep checking and checking and checking. And so it's kind of a different question for that one. I would say no, intuition is never the thing that really confirms the truth. It's something that kind of has to be reinforced through the actions and the behaviors of other people.
Yeah.
And also I'd say through your individual trust. I never trust myself that I fed those birds.
Right.
It's something that you have to kind of internalize, and that's what I've done recently, to kind of tell yourself, yeah, I fed them, and that's okay. And then just you have to remove yourself and walk away. Yeah.
Coming up, a look into the Quiz and Quill archives with Isaac, Ren, and Nevada.
Hi, Isaac. So do you
Hi.
want to tell me a little bit more about the archives for Quiz and Quill? Because I know they went all the way back to 1919.
Yeah, I mean, they go back pretty far.
We brought pieces from Quiz and Quill and sort of selected them as a sort of lens back in history.
Yeah. It's weird to think that you're, a part of this historic thing that's been around for so long. I know that as I was considering the archives, and especially in later editions of this show, like thinking what I wanted to say and what what I wanted on and thought like deserved airtime, I guess.
So I know we wanted to have Nevada come in, who is going to be reading some of these poems, as well as myself. So I have Nevada here with me today, who will be reading a short poem, which is published roughly 104 years ago, and it's called Poor Pussy. And I remember when I first read it, it had such a twist at the end, and I just wasn't expecting it. So...
Poor Pussy. Alice had a dear little cat, which was her pride and joy. She loved him very nearly as much as a mother loves her boy. One day she made him a lovely dress, very pleasing to her eye, but alas she found that it was too short, and then she began to cry. She looked through her tears at the well-dressed cat, who seemed to be in jail, since the only visible parts of him were his head and the tip of his tail. The offensive tail was the cause of her tears, but them she did quickly dry, and soon instead of a saddened look she showed a bread and eye. Laying him tenderly on the bed, she almost ran from the room, and quickly returned with scissors in hand, where Kitty awaited his doom. Gently she smoothed the folds of the frock, and he gave a contented yawn, which at last merged into a mournful wail, for the tip of his tail it was gone.
All right, that was lovely. So I will be reading another feline-themed poem, which was published in the fall of 1982, so roughly 42 years ago. It's called King of the Cats by Kim Finley. Wind caught in a shutter latch. An animal dislodging bits of field stone, sending them tumbling down inner walls. On the grassy floor of the abbey, a procession of cats, formed into two equal lines. The cats at the head of the procession carried a purple coffin on their backs, and on it a crown, as they made their way to a small open grave. Somewhere, as friend dined, a cat sat jumping by the fire, jumped up, disappearing up the chimney, echoing, "Then I am the king of the cats. Then I am the king of the cats."
For our final segment of the episode, we will be having Charlie reading his short story Wicker Basket Womb, followed by an interview with our fiction editor, Grace.
I think in a past life, I was a mother. I got nauseous one morning and threw up in the garden into my daisies and ran to my husband that was too old for me and told him I knew. I traded floral, ruffled day dresses for cloth, plain gowns that flowed at the waist, a begotten house goddess. I frowned over every stretch mark, and I came out of the first birth at death's doorstep. I stared at the infant with a postpartum anger, wishing they were a minuscule blood clot washed away into the river 9 months ago, and I raised them anyway. I embroidered cursive names into suede jackets, and I mashed potatoes in an iron pot for supper. I yelled at them for nothing. I praised them for everything. My face grew wrinkles like my decades-old stretch marks, and my tired lungs breathed their last. And then I was reborn a boy. Yet, her basket remained, tied to my hand with a red ribbon, never to be removed from me. Her basket holds her regret, her grief, her girlhood, and her blood, and now it's mine. I have to carry it with me, since she carries on through me. She hates it when I deny myself kindnesses, yet still longs for that which is not good for her. She misses her routine while still yearning for her autonomy back. I humor her with patterned linen shirts, kitschy stationery, and glittering objects of all kinds. She laughs and smiles and pats my back. I thrill her with my leather work boots and my unkempt hair and my vocal range. She gasps and claps and cheers me on. I disappoint her with explicit music and dreams of tattoos and bad financial decisions. She pouts and glares and chastises me. Sometimes we sit and have picnics. Other times we leave each other stranded on rainy streets. She tucks herself into my bed every morning and cries to me when I go to sleep at night. I love you. I care about you. And I'm sorry, Mom. Your garden has wilted, and it is my job to go dig up the weeds.
Well, hello. So today I am going to be interviewing Charlie about this piece that he just read. So the first question that we were going to discuss, so personally I really appreciate the dimensional look at motherhood in this story, which is impressively done in such a condensed flash fiction package. What can you tell us about your inspiration for this piece?
Thank you. I truly was inspired by the question of what if my dead self, my pre-transition self, was my mother. Since I do live on through her body, she is still me in a fundamental way. I am just undergoing a transition into a different gender, a different state of being. But I do think it is interesting to look at that transition through almost an ancestral sense of things being passed along, the torch being passed on to me. I know a lot of readers came to me and said that it made it think about their relationship with themselves and their mother, which I certainly intended while writing the piece, since I know that that relationship between motherhood and femininity and queerness is all very significant, and people are bound to draw a lot of different things from the intentional ambiguity of this piece. And I trailed off a little, but yeah, it's about really like getting this simple story out about the experience of carrying on, carrying through, and how the past goes with you.
Yeah, I definitely saw that in that piece. And also in regards to the genre that you chose, I'm always interested in flash fiction as a genre because I feel like it is uniquely challenging. A lot of people would assume that writing a small amount would be easier, but it's usually quite the contrary, especially when you're dealing with such heavy concepts. One thing that I do notice with your pieces is that you tend to incorporate lots of ambiguous elements, which lend themselves to lots of individual interpretations from readers. So how do you think that affects your writing process? Do you find yourself often thinking about how your writing will be interpreted, or is this something more inward focused for you?
For me, I truly, at my core, write both what I want to see, but also what I feel is needed in the literary world. I think of what perspectives are not spoken of as much, or angles that people perhaps have not considered to the extent that they should be, or at all. And I think for flash fiction, for this piece specifically, I'll admit the inspiration for this was, I'd had the question lingering in my head. I contemplated it. Should it be a poem? Should it be a flash fiction piece? And I emailed one of my friends and said, do you know when the deadline for Quiz and Quill is? And my friend said, yeah, midnight tonight. And I said, all right, I can make that work. And I did. So in a comedic way, the birth of this piece was very as fast as the piece itself. But it truly was born of an idea that I felt needed to be made and needed to happen, and that this ambiguous shortness of it allowed it to embody the concept more fully, since I could guarantee I wouldn't be cutting anything out by making it inclusive in that sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like the best writing is written by someone who is, of course, enjoying what they're doing and has an interest in their subject matter. And on that note, I wanted to ask you, what has lended itself to the concepts you find yourself gravitating towards? And the ones that I've noticed in your writing, especially in this piece, we have body horror, motherhood, and gender nonconformity.
I, obviously as an English and feminist studies major, am very prone to writing about gender nonconformity and queerness, and bringing that sort of ambiguity to stories that perhaps isn't, not so much like explicit representation, but allowing it to just sit there and be read into if it wants to be read into, to allow the reader to see it there if they want to read that direction. I undeniably, I love horror writing. I love writing that is needed, that needs the discomfort in order to make the piece effective. I like when people are willing to address the uncomfortable in their writing. I think that there is a sort of beauty to the grotesque descriptions in this, because innately it is rather morbid to carry a basket full of blood with you. But in many ways, through my experience with gender, that is how it feels to carry a womb. That may be the experience that some people have with that. I think often of the quote that Frida Kahlo said is something akin to that she paints her own reality. And I feel that I write my own reality in many senses.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then my last question for you, which is what I've been most looking forward to asking you, just to get a little bit of an insight into your writing process. So as a reader, I'm always drawn to detailed sensory descriptions of everyday objects. Is this something that comes naturally to you as a writer, and do your stories come to you as words or images?
This absolutely does come naturally to me as a writer. I am constantly journaling, constantly seeking, beautiful sensory experiences. I take a lot of pictures. I am deeply invested in food and perfume and really grounding myself in all the senses while I'm on Earth, not to be hedonistic, but it comes organically to me, and it's also just good technical writing to get your reader involved through all of those sensory descriptions, and it's also a wonderful place to put subtext, which I think is a brilliant little technical and poetic trick to put in your writing. I admittedly am a very visual artist and writer in general. I do a lot of collage work. As I said, I take a lot of photos. I also daydream a lot. I listen to music a lot. I also, when I go to bed at night, I dream nearly every night. I remember it vividly as I would any other memory, and my brain constantly, in a way, hands me all of these, bright, vibrant, complex ideas, and I've grown to get to know myself and interpret that which my brain hands me and make something that is, psychologically and philosophically and artistically, sound and thought through. It's absolutely... It's lovely. I know that I've thought for a while that I like to keep a distance from my work because of that fear of vulnerability, of being seen by such a wide audience, but undeniably every writer betrays themselves in that regard. You must put your all into your writing. It is the trade-off you give, and it's a trade-off that I'm happy to have made for this piece.
Yeah, definitely. To follow up with that question, do you feel that you tend to gravitate towards writing characters who have a similar sensory experience of the world to you, like wanting to collect objects, wanting to incorporate certain colors that bring to mind different moods?
When I do character design or character work in general, I do often think of, like, the fashion styles that they partake in, what, like, their favorite foods and little details about themselves. My friends have told me that I'm very good at making characters that feel like complete people, and the secret is because I'm cutting out bits of myself and making it a person.
Mm-hmm.
I did some character work recently where I had a character who had these perfume bottles that completely broke off his shelf, and he explained to the man who came to his apartment to fix the shelf all of these different scents and such, and I feel it is important to give your characters that sort of sensory depth. In a sense, yes, my characters are collectors, just as I am. They're little pieces of me, and I in them, yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you for answering these so thoroughly. I definitely appreciate the chance to really get a peek behind the curtain with how your writing process works.
Of course, thank you so much.
Well, that was a lot of fun, wasn't it?
That was.
That was our first episode of the Quiz and Quill new radio show, the Inkwell Radio Hour. As a reminder, Hoodlums and Hipsters is November 7th, and our digital chapbook will be releasing the same day. Follow us on Instagram and look out for the next episode of the Inkwell Radio Hour on November 21st. See ya!